That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and read.
Read to what?
Read. Live reading. I think I'm live now. It's okay. Not that important. Hello, guys. Sorry I'm running a little late. I was seeing off somebody, so we are going to be doing the live reading a little later. We'll see how long it actually goes. I'll still try to do close to an hour of it. It's been a weird day, as you can imagine. I'm packed with stuff. Yeah, no, it's a packed day. So I don't plan on getting through the whole story on this, but this is a new, I will be doing a live reading of a new story that I wrote for Halloween this year for the Archive of Sinners. Technically it's not that, but I'm pretty sure it's still more than an hour with what I have written, and it's almost done. I will be posting it on Patreon later. You will have to be a paid tier to be able to read it, but I will be posting it on Patreon later, probably in the next few days, possibly in somebody's asking me which tier is it going to be on. Literally, that's what the message I just got on my phone was. There's too much long. As you guys remember him being Ken with the Swiffer. What are you doing in the background? Oh yeah, live streams get crazy in this house. Sorry, I'm not doing headphones either because I'm too lazy. You can just do stuff in the background, Martin. I don't care. But yeah, so well, I'll see how many people actually end up in the stream, and from there decide, what I do. Yes, I do apologize again for the late start. So let's go ahead and read it. So this story would take place somewhere after book 4, possibly after book 5. The most important thing to note, reason for that, is the characters involved in it, because obviously the cast switches in some of the books after stuff happens and new characters join and stuff, and that's the main reason I'm putting that one. I did some polling online and kind of figured out what theme I was going to go with, and this is the one that won. It will also be, on top of being on Patreon, as something you can read if you're a paid subscriber, and it will be available to all tiers, $3 and up, so because it starts at $3. Eventually, it will also be published as part of an anthology, which will include some stories that have never actually made their way up on even Patreon when I'm done with it. Like the ones that are in it for sure right now have. It's one from Pretty's point of view from that overlaps with the first book, and then the Halloween story from 2016. It will also have a Ken point of view story and a Thomas point of view story, at least. I'm not sure how much it will end up having because I haven't actually totaled the page count to see if I need to keep adding more or I should stop before the book gets like 600 pages. You guys know. You guys all read my books. I write too much. All right, so but yeah, without further ado, the name of this story is Remains of the Castle. Awkward pause. I'm really bad at live reading, guys. Sorry. I woke up with a pounding headache. Not that the pain was something unusual anymore. I was haunted by twisted nightmares that disrupted my sleep nearly every day. Waking up and taking in the familiar room usually calmed me, but today it was really easy to tell this was not my normal bed. I was laying face down on the floor, my left cheek pressed against the cold cement. I was overcome by the dank stench of mildew and mold. Something rotten floated behind it, but I couldn't place it. I took a deep breath and tried to breathe through my mouth rather than my nose. The air tasted just as musty. I nearly gagged. First thing I had to do was figure out where I was. I searched for answers, but my mind was still fuzzy. I vaguely remembered traveling into Chicago on a case with Pretty, Ken, and Missy. I remembered Missy halting at the entrance of the post office, suddenly announcing she would rather stay outside. We went in, and then? I couldn't seem to remember. I tried to prop myself up, only to find my arms bound behind me. I tried to scream, but all I could taste was the chemicals on the rag gag across my mouth. None of this made sense. My head spun in circles. I shifted positions so I could get a better look around. I saw dark stains scuffed into the floors and walls. Everything was a dingy gray, the whole room thick with cement. A dark hole waited foreboding in front of me. A large metal door hinged to the opening. It was propped open slightly. The scuff of shoes caught my attention from behind me. I heard a soft... I tried to twist around and see the person looming behind me. He roughly grabbed me by the wrist and hauled me up. I got a glance down at my bare feet, scraped and barely visible beneath the long blue skirt? I grunted, trying to shout at my captor. I heard a soft chuckle behind me. His voice was deep and smooth. It sent a shiver up my spine. I started to struggle against my bonds. A rough hand gripped me underneath my chin. Don't worry, my dear Pearl. I met sharp blue eyes that glinted with something I didn't want to identify. He broke the eye contact as he spun me around and shoved me towards the open metal door. You'll be with your mother soon enough. A scream tried to escape my throat, but the next thing I knew, I was being shook gently. I groaned and tilted my head to the side, bringing it flush with the cold cement floor. Ugh, cement, again. I tried to gather my bearings. I was gently propped up by strong, warm hands that I could only assume belonged to my werewolf partner. I squinted my eyes up at him, his handsome face slowly coming into view. Ken? He smiled in relief. Are you okay? Ken Matsumoto was once a normal college student. A run-in with a werewolf caused him to become one himself. At first, he hadn't quite understood what was happening, but after his girlfriend hired us to follow him at suspect of cheating, he ended up hiring us to find out the truth. With the help of Lou, a werewolf from Louisiana, we were able to get through the incident, and Ken ended up replacing the old alpha as the new leader. He insisted on staying by our sides after that, and eventually moved in with us. He was now as big a part of our team as any of the others. His soft black hair brushed across his eyes, and he refused his free hand to slide them back to one side. His features were always soft, and mostly he was always smiling. With his darker skin and dark hair, along with his friendly demeanor, we were nearly opposites. He doted on me a lot, and I couldn't say I disliked the attention. I straightened up and gently pulled out of his arm. Yeah, sorry, not quite sure what happened. Extremely negative energy in this room. That's what happened. Pretty stood off to the side, glaring at one of the pipes. Her curled dark red hair was pulled back behind her in a loose braid. Tendrils draped across her face and shoulders. Paired with her alabaster skin, she was always the epitome of beauty and perfection. Well, until she had to throw the mask away and fight. Pretty wasn't quite human. Unlike Ken, she never had been either. A powerful succubus who traveled to Chicago in a wild goose chase after her sister. Kane Investigations got involved when another succubus had a mark get hit and hired us. It was an extremely messy case that ended with a rather painful ending for Preeti. She sacrificed her sister to save me, and I've trusted her completely ever since. Since then, she's gone on to help heavily with every case, from the investigation aspects to the protection and combat. She also had an easy time with finances, though I tried not to let her throw her money around in the name of our investigation services. I swallowed and nodded my head. Yeah, I guess it just hit me really hard. I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't quite this. My eyes wandered over to the far wall. In my vision, there had been a metal door affixed to it. Now it was just a plain cement wall mounted with pipes and nozzles. Large heaters stood off to the left of it, right next to where the door would have been. What's going on? Our client's voice was enough to bring me back around. I stood up with shaking legs, allowing Ken to assist me by grabbing my elbow. I grunted my thanks to him before turning to face our client. He was a middle-aged man with severely thinning hair. His guts spilled over the belt of his jumpsuit. Thin facial hair coated his chin and upper lip. His face was round and his mouth was curled up in a confused expression. His thick eyebrows were furrowed together as he stared me down. The dingy blue jumpsuit he wore had his name plastered to the left side of his chest. C. Riveras. Sorry, Mr. Riveras. I straightened myself off and brushed Ken aside. I patted myself down to make sure no dirt stuck to my hoodie or jeans. While both Ken and Pretty dressed stylish, I always went for comfort. I didn't have their looks anyway. Not that I ever liked to show off. I ran a finger through my dark blonde hair. So, this is where you keep seeing things? The maintenance worker relaxed his shoulders and quickly nodded his head. See, there have been a lot of weird things going on down here. I sometimes think I see a woman down here at night when it is all empty and lights are off. I see them on the CCTV, but when I come here to check, no one is here. Sometimes it seems like the knobs even turn themselves. A lot of the information he gave me was already in his initial report. Missy hounded our clients for as much information as she could before we took a job. Then she would go further and do days of research. Her ability to find information was astounding, and though she usually sat out of jobs directly where spirits were involved, her help was invaluable. I suppose a support position suited her, though, as a witch is familiar currently without a witch. Her power was limited by what she could gather from the earth itself. I didn't want her to risk getting hurt again, especially knowing there might not be a next time. I honestly felt better with the reassurance that she had our back from the outside. Pretty snapped her phone shut and glanced around. If you don't mind, we'd like to take a look around by ourselves? It wasn't a request. I felt the tingling of her energy in the air. The maintenance worker quickly nodded his head. See, just call me if you need me. He gave Pretty one more glance before he hurried up the stairs. I watched him until he disappeared, then turned my gaze on the succubus. I raised an eyebrow and she simply laughed. What? It's way faster that way. Now we can poke around to our heart's content and not have anyone question if you fall into a heap on the floor again. I rolled my eyes. That's a one-time thing, I swear. I just wasn't expecting the energy to be so intense. Let's get to it, shall we? Ken followed me until I shooed him away, convincing him I was all right. He settled for standing guard near the staircase after that, just in case someone wandered down. He didn't possess the same kind of ability that Pretty and I did when it came to feeling energy, but he could smell and hear anything from miles away. I saw him sniff the air cautiously and wrinkle his nose. I shared his sentiments. It stunk of mildew, grime, and chemicals down here, and I didn't even have a strong sense of smell. Pretty stalked over to a metal shelf stacked with cleaning supplies and repair tools. She picked up a wrench and eyed it suspiciously. Sometimes her way of investigating could be a little weird. It was just easier to let her do her own thing. I turned my attention to the back wall. Standing before it, there was nothing unusual about it. Running my hand over it as best as I could, I didn't feel anything strange about it. The whole basement was abuzz with energy, and it was definitely strongest here. I had to keep myself closed off so the dark energy wouldn't take over me again. I was extremely sensitive to negative energy. It was helpful on cases, but it also had plenty of bad side effects. We were still early in the case, so I didn't want to bog myself down at the beginning. Pretty and I made our way around the room, each poking and prodding as we saw fit. She picked up items and tapped on walls and pipes as if they would give away some secrets just by listening. I ran my hand close to the wall and felt for the energy along it. The whole room was coated thickly in the unpleasant energy. It rolled beneath my fingers. It stretched from the basement on upwards, though it thinned out on the main floor and was barely noticeable in the main area of the post office. The basement was definitely the source. We met up with Ken at the foot of the stairs. I glanced over at the two of them. There's definitely something here, but I think we need to do some more research first. Pretty curtly nodded. Yep, there's a lot of displaced energy here. No spirits actually came out while we were here, but they are definitely waiting. They don't seem particularly happy, but the fact that they haven't done anything really harmful makes me think that they are benign. Ken wrapped his arms around himself. Spirits? You mean like ghosts? This isn't going to be another ghost hunting case, is it? Pretty gave him a playful shove. Oh, come on, you handle ghosts just fine. But I cut him off with a raise of my hand. Doesn't matter. We expected this would probably just be a ghost hunt. It's better than a demon or the like. Let's go back up and reconvene with Missy. We can review our information and try to make a plan. Pause to say hi again. Firearm. Mr. Riveros met us at the top of the stairs. We were in the back area of the post office, which generally was limited to staff and maintenance only. He was nervous to see us ready to leave, but when we explained we would come back once we had done some more research, he seemed much more relieved. Gracias. Just call me when you're ready. We left out the staff entrance and circled around to the front of the post office. Next to a blue mailbox leaned the little girl I was looking for. Dressed in a long black dress and with her short black curly hair, she looked sorely out of place next to the bright blue. She always dressed in this style of clothes regardless of the temperature. Today was cool enough for once that she didn't look heavily overloaded with clothing. Missy shifted and gave me a curt nod. Master, did you find anything? The former witch's familiar rounded out our strange mix-up made-up Canaan investigations. After her witch had been murdered, she had been willed to me, despite the fact that I couldn't keep a contract with witchcraft. She basically funded her for herself in terms of magic and nourishment, but she acted just as a familiar would to a master. I constantly tried to get her to call me by name, but habits were hard to break. Still, she was my friend more than a servant, and I trusted her to gather information. Her wisdom and context proved even more powerful than that of a succubus. I slightly brushed some blonde hair from my eyes. Yeah, a lot of it even. This place is swarming with dark energy in the basement. Nothing concrete yet. Figured it was time we reviewed everything and made a plan. The spirits were pretty dormant too, Pretty added. Though they were far from happy, little ghosties. Ken shivered at the word and Misty raised an eyebrow. She scoffed at the werewolf. Geez, what a scaredy cat. Or should I say, puppy? Ken pouted back at her. I'm not a coward or anything. It's just that ghosts are, well... She clicked her tongue at him. It would take quite a powerful spirit to be able to overcome you, dog boy. I opted not to bring up the fact that we indeed had faced some of these spirits. I let Ken and Missy continue their little argument and turned my attention back to the area around us. There was an Aldi across the street. One street over on the same side was the Englewood Health Center. There was a bench at the corner, and I figured it would make do. Let's grab some lunch and get to work, shall we? I spoke up, breaking up the inane argument that was going on between my two partners. Pretty clapped her hands excitedly at the idea. Yes, yes, food. Ken's stomach growled in agreement. He flushed from the back of his neck. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. A quick stop into Aldi got us lunch, though much of my time was spent trying to keep Pretty from buying everything in the store while Ken and Missy actually did the shopping. She was so excited at the prices that she thought we had to have everything. Trying to convince her that we not only did not need a new shelf, but that we'd also have to lug it all the way back to the car on foot was the most difficult spot of the excursion. With food in tow, the four of us made our way back across the street and towards the bench by the community center. Ken settled down in the grass just behind the bench, allowing for the rest of us to squish onto it together. Missy pulled up her tablet as she absent-mindedly munched on her sandwich. Words. The Englewood post office has a myriad of rumors about odd sightings in the basement, mostly from maintenance workers, especially those who work late shifts or are alone. Some of the other postal employees have reported that they felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety that made them unable to go down there. We didn't see anything, but we definitely felt something, Pretty agreed. And I mean, the guy who hired us specifically did so because he was seeing and hearing some weird things, right? I nodded my head as I swallowed. Yeah, Mr. Riveros has been working there for nearly a decade now, so he's used to a strange shift of atmosphere and catches glimpses of things out of the corner of his eye. His wife recently became pregnant, and he's worried about the safety of his family. He mentioned that he's hearing things more and more, specifically a young girl's voice. From behind me, I heard Ken whimper as he wrapped his arms around himself and suppressed a shiver. Missy rolled her eyes but continued to scan through her tablet. The Englewood area became pretty infamous after the Chicago's World Fair in the 1890s, she commented dryly. I simply nodded and took another bite. It would be more surprising to find someone local that didn't know about the Chicago World's Fair and all the unseen horrors it brought with it. I couldn't tell you everything about it, but I knew the basics, that it gave birth to the Ferris wheel, Cracker Jack, and even the concept of the hot dog bun, to name a few, as well as one of Chicago's most infamous serial killers. Ken straightened up behind me, kneeling over the back of the bench to get a better look at the tablet, almost resting his head on against my shoulder. I eyed him and raised an eyebrow, but he didn't seem to notice. Rather, instead, he dropped his chin right down on me. I tried not to look as embarrassed as I felt. I turned my attention back to Missy. What happened during the World's Fair? Ken blinked over at her. She scoffed at him. Really? Are you that dense? Everyone in Chicago knows about that. I am from California originally, though, so... Pretty rubbed her hands together excitedly. H.H. Holmes, the man, the legend, the myth, best known for his infamous murder castle that once stood right here in Englewood, right where that post office stands today. Murder castle? Before Pretty could continue rambling, I took over. H.H. Holmes built a strange and horrific piece of architecture here during the World's Fair. It was basically a boarding house. He hired multiple contractors for every portion of the project so that no one aside from him knew the final floor plan in its entirety. There were stairs and hallways that led nowhere, and oddly angled hallways and windowless rooms. He had gas that could be pumped into some of the rooms, and even one had with a steel door. In the basement, he had a huge oven where he burned the bodies of some of his victims and any evidence that they might leave behind. I felt Ken shiver against my shoulder. He glanced over at Pretty. Like the bloody labyrinth? She grinned and nodded. Yep, like the bloody labyrinth. I had no idea what they were talking about, but that was often the norm. Despite Ken being terrified of ghosts and anything related to the supernatural, he and Pretty would often watch horror shows together. I assumed it was in reference to one of those, and I didn't care to get any more information. Missy also ignored them. She flipped through her tablet, and continued her report. Anyways, it's pretty much the normal haunts in regards to the post office basement. Workers have heard things and seen things. Some workers have even had extreme cases of anxiety when they enter. As far as what they've seen and heard, the reports are all over the place. Anything from a woman wailing to the thunk of metal, like a door closing. I frowned. The kiln he had in the basement of his home. Missy pursed her lips, her eyes glued to the tablet. That is my guess. But you guys will have to investigate to really know for sure. I quickly nodded. Yeah, we'll have to see if our client can arrange for us to stay overnight. I felt Ken's hand squeeze my arm. Stay overnight? Isn't that when the ghosts are most active? I rolled my eyes. Well, duh. How else are we going to figure out what's going on if we don't experience it for ourselves? Before Ken could retort, Missy continued her report. There were only a few of Holmes' victims identified, and mostly based on subjective evidence rather than anything concrete. Forensic wasn't what it was back then. The assumed victims were Julia Connor and her daughter Pearl in 1891. Emmeline Cigrand in 1892, and Minnie and Nanny Williams in 1893. Minnie was actually married to Holmes, as he swindled her out of her inheritance. Julia was allegedly Holmes' lover, and Emmeline was his former secretary that he proposed to prior to her death. They never found the bodies, but Holmes was rumored to have sold their cadavers to medical schools. He claimed that Julia and Emmeline died while undergoing illegal abortions. The evidence that they did find, they recovered Minnie's watch chain and Nanny's garter belt in the oven and in one of the ovens. They found the bones of a young child, which were presumably Pearl's remains. It was thought that he poisoned her. For Emmeline, they came up with some hair and bones that matched close enough to her body. There was also an eyewitness that saw Holmes and another man hauling a big trunk out of his home the day after her disappearance. I folded my arms across my chest. That fits with what I know. His house was built purposely to disorient and trap his victims. He sold their bodies to science after he murdered them. There was never a definitive count as to how many people he actually murdered. He confessed to at least 20 murders, but historians believe that number to be 10 times that. Yeah, it says he only confessed to 27, most of who were women. They also tried him for the death of his so-called janitor and the man's children. But with all of that said, I don't think we'll be able to easily identify just who is haunting Mr. Rivera's with this research alone. It's risky to go in without more streamlined information, but this is the best I can do. I'm sorry, Master. Don't call me Master, I shook her off. But no, I do think we have a lead. When I first went into the basement, I was hit with an overwhelming energy. I saw a weird vision of what I assume was Holmes and one of his victims. He called her Pearl. Missy's eyes widened. Wait, you had a vision? What happened? You didn't, fall over or anything, did you? Pretty held back her laughter. I shot her a glare, but shook my head. That's not important. Pearl might be our lead. If she's still hanging around there, maybe we can get in touch with her. She might be able to help us figure out what's going on. I don't like it, Missy pouted. Most of the time, she looked far too grown up for her small body, but in moments like these, she really looked like a child. I found it quite endearing. It'll be fine, Pretty reassured her. I'll be there, and the puppy will be there. He might be a big scaredy cat at times, but we know he would do anything to keep Very here safe. Ken's grip on my shoulder tightened. Of course, I won't let any harm come to Very. I swatted him away. I don't need you guys to protect me. We're a team. We'll do this all together. If it gets too much, we'll pull back and get out of there. Missy wasn't thrilled with the answer, but she let the topic drop. Her face was scrunched up in a frown, but she turned her eyes back to the tablet. She glanced down at it like it was the most interesting thing in the world. I knew she wanted to come with, but she couldn't. Spirits and familiars didn't mix well. Our plan sounded simple, but there were a lot of variables we couldn't control. The supernatural was always tricky. Still, we wouldn't get anywhere if we didn't dive right into the case directly. Missy would keep digging on her end, but we all knew there wasn't much of a chance she'd find anything else. We were looking at the ghosts left from a case long before the internet and widespread media. The research that was available had been carefully compiled from reputable sources. We already had in our hands a lot more than most would have been able to get from such an old case, but being about Chicago's prominent serial killer and perhaps the U.S.'s first known of his type. A quick call to Mr. Rivera's left us with some time to kill before the post office closed for the day. We found a coffee shop not too far away to pass time. Pretty left us briefly to go do some shopping. Ken and Missy and I spent the time sipping warm beverages and reviewing all of the research and data we could compile. Ken gave up after a couple hours and settled his head on the table for a quick nap. Missy and I kept going until our eyes were fuzzy. I tapped my finger against the table as I leaned back. My hot chocolate was lukewarm, the third I'd ordered since I'd arrived. I was no closer to a plan than I had been before we arrived. All we had was try and contact Pearl's ghost. After that, not much. We had no idea what exactly we were dealing with besides the generic basics. I hated going in this open, but we didn't have much of a choice. I checked my phone and when I realized the time, I decided to make a quick call. I ducked out, letting Missy know before stepping into the crisp, cool air of fall. Slid my hands into my hoodie, just leaving my fingers sticking out. A few clicks on my phone screen had it ringing. A rather groggy-sounding voice answered on the other end. Very? It's a surprise. Long time no speak. I tried to limit my long-distance calling, usually sitting for emails between us for correspondence. Felt this time that a voice-to-voice chat was the ideal setting. If I had questions about ghost hunting, though, he was the first person I turned to. Klassen Clear was a German ghost hunter I had met Several years back, when he tracked a haunted mare all the way to Chicago, he enlisted our help to help find the mare. It wasn't long after that we learned it was haunted, and our case went from normal to paranormal. We succeeded in exorcising the ghost in the end, but it cost us the life of his comrade. Still, after Klaus returned to Germany, he stayed in touch. He even visited during my mentor's funeral and a few times after for local ghost hunts. He taught me a lot about dealing with spirits, but we didn't have his experience, knowledge, or equipment. We were relying entirely on our own supernatural abilities this time. Yeah, sorry to call. I figured you might be able to take a break and talk to me for a short bit. Klaus had been super excited when I told him about our latest client. So excited that he almost flew over from Germany just to take part in the hunt. But he had a big job on his own he was dealing with. At least he wasn't handling it all on his own, but I still worried about him. He was just your ordinary human. His only special ability was his know-how for when it came to ghosts. I heard Klaus whisper something in German to someone behind him. A few heavy footsteps and the sound of a door later, he was back on the phone. Yeah, sorry. You have questions about the case? How's it going so far? Man, I wish I could be there. I chuckled softly. You have your own hands full. I was just wondering how you would generally handle a case where there isn't a whole lot of information to really work off of. I have one lead, but not sure how far that will take it. Klaus let out a boisterous laugh. Ha, you would hate my methods. I think Johann was much better at the planning than me. I sort of wing it. More like Pretty would, yes? I couldn't argue with him there. Yeah, you're probably right. It just makes me nervous going in with half-assed knowledge. I'm sure you'll be fine. You guys pack quite some power. Just stay on your toes and watch for anything strange. You should sense it long before it hits you. I spent a little more time talking with Klaus, but I didn't want to keep him too long. I was hoping for more of a game plan, but I should have known he was the type to just go with the flow. He wasn't brash or reckless by far, but he was better thinking of solutions under pressure. Of course, he had all his equipment to back him up. I suppose having psychic powers along with a succubus in a whirl at my side should be enough. Pretty returned less than half an hour later. Ken and Misty were bickering about something, but I had already tuned them out. I was scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly when the door opened and the chill welcomed her back. She sauntered over to her table and squeezed in a chair between Misty and Ken, pushing them apart. We tried to relax while we waited for the call for Mr. Riveras. When it came, we left the coffee shop and a hefty tip on the table. Mr. Riveras met us by the staff entrance of the post office. The front doors were sealed and the lights were dark. He unlocked the door and held it open for us, ushering us inside. A few other staff members were still lingering around, some still finishing up tasks for the day. We got a few curious looks, but Mr. Riveras had already explained the situation prior to him hiring us. Most of the eyes were drawn to Pretty, but that was the usual. Missy stayed outside, but we had her hooked up with a cell phone and walkie-talkie in case something happened. The paranormal had a tendency to mess with electronics. Missy could reach out to us with her magic, but there were risks for her that I wasn't willing to let her take. I didn't want her to hurt herself any more for me than she already had. I couldn't heal her like a real master could. I had no witchcraft, and my power was entirely different. She was on her own. Sorry, talking this long. We bid Mr. Riveras a good night after the post was finally empty. He was anxious, but Pretty managed to coax him to go home to his wife. We waited in silence in the basement until we were sure he was gone. Pretty nodded and turned to me. Okay, let's get started. I closed my eyes and stretched my hands out. I let the energy snake out from my fingertips, the tendrils sliding into the air. Pearl, can you hear me? I'd like to talk with you. The air shifted almost instantly. A shiver ran up my spine, and I took a few steps back. Pretty and Ken were at my side, their presence reassuring. The temperature in the room dropped. I saw my breath curl in front of me with wispy white tendrils. The lights flickered above our heads. Pretty threw her hand up in the air and fire danced on her fingers tips just as they went out. The next thing I knew, my cheek was against the floor. Again. My head was groggy. The temperatures were still cold, but it was a cold linoleum, not cement. I lifted my head off the ground and peered around. Dark shadows traced paths across the twisted hallway, jutted to the side, and disappeared. A door stood off to either side, something a bit off about the angles. The hallway was dark and quiet around me. I slid my knees beneath me and pulled myself up. My legs wobbled beneath me. I pressed my hand against the wall to keep myself balanced. I reached out with my senses first, trying to find anything. It was like a rubber band was slung back at me. The force set me reeling, and I slammed my shoulder into the wall. My head was spinning. I blinked to clear my vision. pretty? Ken? I called out. My voice cracked. My throat was dry. I huffed out another breath. I ran my tongue across my dried, cracking lips to wet them. It was clear I wasn't in the basement anymore, but I had no idea where I was. My senses were all out of whack. A few steps forward had me suffering an overwhelming case of vertigo. The air around me was abuzz with energy. It made me nauseous. I clung to the wall as I made my way to the first door. The knob gave away easily, and I stumbled inside. The room was sparsely furnished. There was a single wide bed against the back wall and a desk beside it. A small candle lamp sat on the desk next to a small stack of papers and a book. A heavy-looking trunk was pushed against the edge of the bed. Else the room was completely empty. I examined the paper on the desk, but the handwriting was gibberish. At least it certainly wasn't English. The book contained more of the same scrawled illegible words. There were some doodles in it as well, trains and buildings I didn't recognize. I put it down and checked the trunk next. The trunk was filled with heavy, stiff-colored dresses. Their colors were drab but delicately trimmed with thick white lace. I held one up to eye it better. It was held closed with buttons and clasps rather than zippers. The style spoke of clothing from at least 100 years ago. Hi, Cat. Was this some costume chest? You want to come? Okay, I guess not. Sorry, Cat bothering me. I put the dress back in the trunk and closed it. This didn't help me at all. The haze around my vision remained. It was almost like there was a layer of mist across everything. I decided to leave this room for now and try the one across the hall. The doors appeared to be lined up, but as I crossed towards it, I found them set apart by a few inches. The floor gradually sloped upwards a few inches towards it as well. The door and knob set on this door were different than the ones across the room. I turned the knob, but it didn't budge. Come on. I knelt down in front of the door and eyed the lock. Pretty taught me pretty early on how to pick locks with my power, but it wasn't something that I like to do often. I doubted that this was the kind of situation I really had to be worried about that, though. I let the small tendrils of my power waft out, this time keeping them closed. The air answered me immediately. The nausea overtook me again. I fought through it long enough to get my power into the lock and move the tumbler to allow my entry. I was surprised to find the door was unlocked. I was about to stand up when there was a cold blast of dark energy. Cat is moving around in my lap, guys. Sorry. The door slammed open from the other side and knocked into me, sending me sprawling back. I rolled to avoid hitting my head, instead landing on my already smarting shoulder. I cursed silently under my breath and quickly continued to roll to get my feet back underneath me. I looked up in time to see a dark shadow slip past me. My body was trembling. I collapsed to my knees. I found it hard to breathe. I quickly looked down, averting my gaze from the dark spirit in the hallway. I heard a coarse chuckle as it sauntered away from me, down the hall. Puffs of white breath floated around me as I gasped. I was suddenly freezing. I couldn't stop myself from shivering. Was that what we were dealing with? It didn't feel like a simple spirit. The energy was so dark and cruel. It was more demonic than human, if it was a demon. I tried to get my thoughts in order. Fear was threatening to override my mind. Nothing good ever came from demons. I couldn't fight them. I was just a pathetic human. Even Pretty and Ken wouldn't be enough. It would shred them to pieces. It would tear them away from me just like it had the others I loved. It would... A cold hand on my shoulder broke me out of my terrified thoughts. The cold of the air had dropped to a bearable temperature. My breath came back to me, though the white wisp of smoke still swirled with each puff, they gradually softened. I didn't realize my eyes were screwed shut until I opened them. I slowly looked up towards the person standing before me. A young girl wearing a tattered dress stood before me. Her face was obscured by her ghostly aura. Dark hair draped across her shoulders and down her back. A ribbon hung loosely in her hair, probably once tied up properly. The light blue matched the white and the blue of her dress. She gently pulled her hand back from me. I stared at her for a moment before it clicked. I swallowed before I spoke. Pearl? Her aura brightened for a moment. I felt like she was smiling at me. I got it right then. I slowly stood up to face her. I stood several heads above her. I still couldn't see her face clearly. She turned away from me and started down the hallway. Wait, I called after her. Where are you going? She paused before the turn in the hallway and glanced over her shoulder. She turned away after a few seconds and disappeared around the corner. I found myself following her. As the hallway twisted out of view, I stepped around the corner and found her just a few feet ahead. She continued on as soon as I appeared. She kept moving through the twisting, uneven hallways with relaxed ease. The hallway disoriented me if I paid attention to it, so instead I focused on the back of her head. She led me around another turn and finally stopped before a door. She turned back to me and tilted her head slightly. She stepped away as I neared the door. I glanced over at her, but she only ushered me forward. I hesitated for a moment before gripping the doorknob. With a deep breath, I yanked the door open. The room was darker than the one I had entered before. A quick glance around showed me there were no windows, and I blamed that for the darkened interior. I shoved into the room and quietly with my hands in front of me. As my eyes adjusted, I spotted a small desk with a candleless lamp. There was a bed shoved into the back corner. As I neared it, I finally heard the whimpering. I stopped dead in my tracks. I knew that sound, but it took me a second to place it. As soon as I did, I raced towards the bed, dodging towards the end of it. I climbed over the edge and peered into the crack between it and the wall. Ken? He sprang up out of the small gap and flung himself onto the bed. He wrapped his arms around my waist and buried his face into my stomach. Very! His cries were muffled against my hoodie. I gently patted him on the head. Come on, Ken, keep it together. He sniffled into my shirt. I cringed at the thought of all the snot he was getting on me. But I was so scared. There was this ghost, a little girl, and she kept trying to come near me. I glanced back at Pearl, who stood in the doorway. She didn't seem fazed in the slightest. I guess she found Ken before she found me. Of course he would be scared shitless. Anything that hinted at the supernatural freaked him out. He was easily scared. He definitely painted a contradictory image as a werewolf. That's Pearl, I informed him. The ghost we were trying to get in contact with. She led me to you. She doesn't mean to harm us. I can feel it. I tilted my head towards the door. His grip on me tightened, but he slowly lifted his head over my shoulder and followed my gaze. I felt him trembling as he clung to me. He took deep breaths and did his best not to scream. I stroked his back gently to help calm him. It's all right, I assured him. She isn't going to hurt us. I think she wants to help. Ken turned his eyes back towards me. I met and held his gaze. I might have been able to change his mind using my powers, but I wasn't about to coerce someone I cared about into anything. And since the last time I'd used my powers on Ken resulted in hurting him, I wasn't about to use them on him, especially after that. Instead, I pleaded with him with my eyes alone. I knew he trusted me infallibly, but fear could easily override trust. His family was superstitious, which resulted in his skittish personality in regards to the paranormal. If he hadn't been bitten and turned into a werewolf, he would have never had to learn that those nightmarish things actually existed. I wished I could protect him, but he was much stronger than me. If we worked together, though, we could survive anything. Ken slowly nodded, a small smile gracing his lips. His grip on my waist loosened as he pulled back away from me. I'll always trust you. I believe in you always, without a doubt. I felt my face flush. He needed to stop putting me up on such a high pedestal. I gently pushed him away, grateful for the darkness of the room. Don't say things like that. Anyways, we should keep moving. Try to figure out what's going on. Pearl's quiet giggle interrupted us. I gave her an annoyed look, but she just tilted her head to the side. I climbed off the bed and moved towards her. Ken was right on my heels. Pearl, can you tell us what's going on here? Where are we? I asked her. She shifted her head to the other side. Her voice was quiet and came out in broken words. It was like there was static interference. Home. Mother. Vanished. I tried to piece together things based on what I knew. Home. My guess was this crazy twisting hallway and insane architecture we were somehow in H.H. Holmes' murder castle. I had no idea how that was possible, but considering how everything was dark and hazy, we weren't transported back in time or something unreasonable like that. I didn't know everything a spare could do. Perhaps a stronger entity could make its own artificial world and trap people there. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Right, if this was even a spirit. The foreboding feeling from earlier came back to me. We foolishly had thought it was a simple haunting. But this was not that energy I felt. But that was not the energy I felt from when that dark thing passed me. I unfortunately had experience with a demon, and the feeling was far too similar for comfort. Very? Ken was looking at me with a pout. He was getting scared again, all because I suddenly clammed up and let my thoughts wander. I quickly shook my head and got myself back on focus. No, it's nothing. but I think Pearl is trying to tell us we were in Holmes' boarding house where she lived with her mother. It seems she could not find her mother, though. Ken made a face. Wait, how did we get in such a creepy place? I shook my head. I honestly don't know. Pretty might have a lead, but we'll have to find her. If she's even in here with us. My theory is whichever big bad ghost is leading the haunt of the post office has enough power to create this artificial world with his abilities and trap us here. I tried to use my powers earlier, and they basically snapped back at me. Ken quickly nodded his head. Yeah. I tried to go into wolf form, but nothing happened. I felt some pain, but the transformation never took. That's when the ghost girl, Pearl, showed up and chased me into this bedroom. You can't transform? Ken made a face. Nope. Weird, huh? Since that's basically part of me. I mean, not saying your power isn't a part of you, too, but a werewolf is half human, half man kind of deal. I don't think it uses any real special powers to transform, but maybe I'm wrong. I guess I'll ask Lou or Olivia next time I have the chance. Pearl still stood in front of us, but her attention was now directed to outside the hallway. When she realized we had stopped talking, she turned her blurry face towards us. I wish I could read her expression. I couldn't even feel what emotion she was expressing. So, Ken asked in a quiet voice, what does she want? Right. I hadn't finished decoding the rest of what she had said. She was in her home and couldn't find her mother. The fact that she was helping and didn't mean she was necessarily a friendly spirit. Spirits remained behind because they had unfinished business. She wasn't threatening, but that didn't mean she didn't want something. It clicked easily, and I turned back to hers. Okay, Pearl, we'll help you find your mother. All right, I'm going to stop there. That is not all of it. There is still more left of it. But yeah, so that is the start of just a good portion of the short story that I wrote for Halloween this year, following H.H. Holmes. There's some fun stuff in it. It has not been edited, so some of them, I was like, that's why I had some weird pauses in there too, because I was like reading it and like, wow, what did I write there? That's the wrong word. So I will be working on finishing it over the next few days, and it will be up on Patreon when it's done. So you guys can read it there. Any of the tiers will have it from $3 and up. No special with that. But if you guys showed up, I saw one person comment. So if you guys showed up and commented to let me know you were here, everyone gets a free entry into the raffle for showing up. Wow. So I'm adding that right now. So yeah, we have one more live event scheduled for today. It is a lore talk starting at 9, lore Q&A and things. We'll see how long that one goes. I wanted it to go at least half hour, but I mean, I'm already really burned out from everything I've already done today. But we'll see, and that's still only like an hour away, so I didn't have too many people show up to most of these, so I'm just like, I don't know if it's worth it. But keep playing along. All the other events and stuff run until 11. I will be doing the what do you call that? Raffle. I will be raffling, choosing the raffle and the winners and stuff between 11 and 11:30, and announcing the results at 11:30. I have a lot of prizes and stuff to choose from, so yeah. Ow! Cat on my lap just jumped off and put claws in my leg. Thank you guys for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope you look forward to it. Maybe the edited version won't be so harsh either. Goodbye for now.